Rock, paper, scissors is a deadly game. Sometimes you win, sometimes you get kicked in the nuts and cry in front of your cousins. But that's the name of the game in Age of Empires 4. It's all about rock, paper, scissors with the unit types. In this video today, we're going to quickly go through each of the different generic units that the game has to offer, talking about their strengths and what they help to counter on the battlefield. While every faction will have their own unique unit that pulls from the general unit types, everyone will have the ability to field all of the aforementioned unit types. It's really a matter of knowing your civilization's strengths and helping shore up their weaknesses. If you're new to the game and want a general overview of each faction, you can find my video on the subject link in the upper right corner. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I like to do things is upfront the knowledge in my videos to ensure this is the information you're looking for. So let's go into a quick overview of what units counter what. And a lot of this will be self-explanatory, but each unit will get either a bonus to damage to the unit they counter, or will be properly armored against others. So with that being said, Spearmen will counter both Horsemen and can brace to nullify and counter heavy knights. Archers can then counter Spearmen, Horsemen counter said archers, then men-at-arms can outtrade Spearmen by virtue of their armor characteristic as well as outlast the damage from archers. Crossbowmen thrive against men-at-arms and knights due to their increased damage to heavy. Heavy knights, on the other hand, will counter every range unit and men-at-arms because of their heavy burst damage from their lance, followed by substantial damage mitigation due to their armor. Lastly, handgunners can effectively trade into every unit in the game as they have such a high amount of raw damage that even armor can barely mitigate it. So that's a loose rundown of what we'll be covering in this video today. If you'd like to quickly navigate to any topic we'll be discussing, you can use the chapters in the timeline and the description to jump to the part that interests you the most. If you end up enjoying the video, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. I can't tell you how much that helps against the dreaded YouTube algorithm. But let's get started on what units counter what in Age of Empires 4. So now that we're in the game, you can see the mighty army of the Rus here, and we're going to go through things pretty much from the more basic units up to the more advanced units. And please keep in mind, every single faction or civilization does have specialist versions of certain units, or they get certain bonuses to certain units. For all intents and purposes, everything you're seeing before you is at the max age of age 4, and it's elite variation. So there might be some discrepancies with certain damages, but for the most part, this should give you an idea of how that unit plays in Age of Empires 4. And an example too here would be, this is the Strix, which are the special unique gunpowder infantry for the Rus, versus the Handcannoneer over here, which would just be your generic run-of-the-mill version of your gunpowder infantry. So our first unit to take a look at is the Spearmen. And the Spearmen are just going to be your initial unit that you'll have access to. And by hovering over this, we're going to take a look at all the statistics: health, armor, movement, attack. And these things are really important because when you look at attack, it's going to give you a lot of really valuable information. So taking a look here, we can see that the Spearmen do 11 melee damage, and then they get a +2 22 bonus versus cavalry. Now, a lot of games have a very cryptic or a weird way of translating damage. Like it'll say, like for example, Total War Warhammer will say weapon strength X value, and it doesn't really equate to a certain specific damage value. In this game, it does. So if these Spearmen were to attack a mounted horseman of any variation, so any type of cavalry unit, they would get 11 plus 22 for a total of 33 damage. And another really cool thing about Spearmen is they can press V, or let's do the whole unit here, and they can stand their ground. This allows them to brace, and when they brace, they will mitigate the charge bonus entirely of a cavalry unit. Cavalry units get 2 profiles of attack that we'll go through in a little bit, but they won't be able to use their big devastating lance charge, and instead they'll take a ton of damage from the braced Spearmen. So that is your basic run-of-the-mill unit. They're very cost-effective, but they will really start to get hampered when they're dealing with archers, which, because they've got 0 armor, will cut through them like butter, or even men-at-arms, because the men-at-arms have armor and can trade more effectively into Spearmen. Our other unit since we're talking about infantry, would be the men-at-arms. Now, this is your heavy melee infantry, and it's important to take a look at this little tooltip here below the name. This says heavy melee infantry, these say light melee infantry. So any distinction of the actual unit itself will be distinguished there. So by hovering over here, again, we're going to get the whole breakout. We get 14 sword melee attack. You can see its attack speed, so on and so forth. But the big thing here with men-at-arms is they have a good deal of armor. Right here with the 3 stars, it gives them 5 versus melee and 5 versus ranged. So how armor works in this game is exactly how you would imagine. So let's say it was just 2 of the same exact men-at-arms squaring off. And the reason I say that is because when you look at certain units like the Holy Roman Empire, they will do more damage to other men-at-arms because they get bonuses versus armored, or in some cases bonuses versus heavy. Just depends upon where its upgrades are. So if we're looking at 14 damage on 14 damage, if just 2 men-at-arms are fighting, 5 of that damage is going to be mitigated because of the 5 versus melee in the armor field. So 9 damage would actually swing through and hit your men-at-arms. And because of the rock, paper, scissors elements of this game, like I said before, men-at-arms are going to do really well against killing your spearmen. Your spearmen are going to do really well against killing horsemen. And then at the same time, your archers are going to kill your spearmen, and your horsemen are going to kill your archers. So that will always exist, some sort of again, rock, paper, scissors. And you'll be able to see it in just their profiles. It helps to really understand things. Now, sticking on with the kind of basic units, let's talk about archers. And archers are going to be your basic ranged infantry unit. And I apologize for the breaking of continuity here. My original file of the archers got corrupted, so I had to make a new file to do this. But let's take a look here at these guys and look at their actual profile. Keep in mind, these are the elite archers, so their damage profile is going to be a little bit larger, just like it is for the rest of the units we're talking about here today. But they will do a total of 16 damage to a light melee infantry unit. 8 from that native bow damage, then a +8 versus light melee infantry. So this is going to be the unit that is going to be shutting down your spearmen. And it's a really important unit in the beginning portion of the game because it will do so much damage to them, especially if you're playing as, say, the English with the longbowmen. You'll get a further range. You'll get an additional +2 to their tile range, so it'll go from 5 to 7, and you'll get more damage, just a slightly slower movement profile. But like I said, these are going to be crucial to shutting down any kind of early spearman play or even late game spearman play. So crossbowmen here, they are, again, light ranged infantry, so they're not going to be very tanky. Of course, they have very low health too, but now they do 15 crossbow range damage, which is very nice, right? So they even if they don't hit a heavy target, they'll still do quite a bit of damage. But if they do hit a heavy target, they'll get that +8. So this allows them to counter when they're fighting against men-at-arms. So it gives them a little bit of variety here. So these are just kind of the 4 basic units that you'll be dealing with that will deal with a lot of stuff, right? You've got your different types of infantry across both the light and heavy, and you've got your different types of archers across both the archers themselves and then the crossbowmen. Let's jump down just a little bit more of the advanced units in the horsemen, infantry, and gunpowder units. And here we have all 4 of those. Well, 5 because I've also put the priests over here and the scouts. But your scout is your basic guy, right? You start off the game with these. They have got really no true combat potential. Really what they're going to be doing is fighting against other scouts if you even want to do that, but you're not really going to. But I just wanted to highlight them in this overall breakdown of all the units because I figured it was worthwhile. But the other real initial foray into cavalry is your horsemen. Now the horsemen might seem that they're going to be outclassed by the knight as soon as you can make knights, but they still do have a purpose. So highlighting over this, they get a +13 damage versus ranged. So really the horsemen are going to be used to tying down any type of ranged unit that you find on the map, right? Your crossbowmen, your archers, even gunpowder units later in the game, they're going to be doing an additional 13 for a total of 26 damage into them. That is going to be very crucial to shutting down that early kind of play against archers and crossbowmen. And moving from those horsemen, we can get into the elite knights, just your heavy melee cav. Now, the knights here have a very interesting profile. You can see it says 43 lance melee. Now, for Rus in specific, and this will vary from civilization to civilization, as soon as this unit hits the front line, it will use this 43 damage. It'll shatter the lance, and they will pick up a sword to start fighting. And for the Rus, that sword will do 29 melee damage. Like I said before, this will vary typically for anywhere from 22 to 29, depending upon the civilization. And other upgrades, such as from the blacksmith, so on and so forth, will change a lot of these values. But this helps to give you a baseline. So you can see these units are really going to be shock units, right? Your shock cavalry that can be used in a cycle charging fashion, in the sense that you hit the line of the enemy, you break your lance, you pull the unit back out of engagement, wait for their lance to regenerate in their hand, and you just do the same thing over and over. This is a little bit more micro intensive. It's going to force you to have to constantly cycle charge, but it will at the same time result in a higher damage threshold. The nice thing too about these is they are very tanky. They have a good amount of health at 270 with damage mitigation for both melee and ranged at 5. So basically you're just slapping a man-at-arm on a horse, giving him a damage bonus. So you can see how these guys can be really strong. Now, the other more elite unit is the gunpowder unit. We're going to look at both of these. So here's the Streltsy, which is the Rus, flavorful, unique gunpowder infantry unit. So I just wanted to show these guys off really quick, but we'll take a look here at the Handcannoneer from the Holy Roman Empire, because it is just a standard unit. So these do not get any kind of quote-unquote AP bonuses, right? There's no bonuses versus heavy or light or ranged or cavalry, anything of the sort. But they do a flat 42 damage, which is huge. So even though it's 42 range damage and I were to shoot a knight, it would still do 37 damage, which is very substantial. They do have a slower attack speed at 2, but they can still just pour on so much damage. And it is worth noting, comparing these even to crossbowmen, they have a significant, a 1 tile reduction in range, with archers being the same as crossbowmen in their range here. English longbowmen would of course have a longer range and what have you, and other variations of the Handcannoneers have different range values. Like these guys have 4 tiles as well, but just to give you an idea of how this will differ from civilization to civilization. But overall, this just covers all of your both infantry and your cavalry units, and this is going to be very interesting as you play through your skirmishes or your multiplayer games. You know, one of my friends had really articulated a really interesting tactic would be, hey, I'm going to rush you with some horsemen. Now you're going to create spearmen to counter those horsemen, but at the same time I'm rushing you with those horsemen, I'm making some archers to come and then kill your spearmen you've just created in a hurry, wasting a lot of your resources, and I now have 2 different units I can fight into you with. So keep these rock, paper, scissors in mind, because it is important to making your army composition in Age of Empires 4. Now, the last thing we're going to jump into very quickly is the artillery. And here are all 4 of our artillery units. We've got some fun targets we can hit. And the first one we're going to look at here is the Springald. Now, the Springald, I'm going to go ahead and deploy. If you hold down right click, you can deploy things. You can see its firing arc and everything. That allows for it to actually to shoot. You can see that it's not doing a ton of damage. If we highlight, I'm going to face this the other direction so it doesn't destroy that tower. If we highlight its damage, you can see that it does 60 range damage, which is great, but 20 versus siege. So it does more damage towards siege engines. It does get a nice armor versus range too, so it will not be taking much range damage. And it's of course going to be mainly aimed at shutting down other artillery pieces. That's the main portion of the Springald. It's the very first real artillery piece you get access to, along with the Mangonel. If I can get access. There it is. Now look at the Mangonel. It's 12 siege damage, not a whole ton, right? But it does 24 versus buildings. So that in and of itself too is not a whole ton of damage versus buildings. The real benefit of using a Mangonel would be to shoot into clumped up infantry. What you can do is, if I were to say attack this unit of infantry, I would right click here in the center, and those balls, the boulders being launched from the Mangonel, ball sounds way less harmful, would do a high amount of splash damage, and it would really, really be crippling to this unit. One shot would do probably about 15 to 20% health, depending upon how that splash hit and if the unit was moving. So your Mangonel is really going to be a lot more focused on anti-infantry, especially in the early game. So those are your first 2 real early versions of artillery. Moving up, we get the counterweight trebuchet. Now, 150 damage Very slow attack speed, but 300 damage versus buildings. So if we deploy this, you can see it's going to start really just hauling some balls downrange. And boom, like it just did so much damage. And like I said, you can tell this is just going to do 150 plus 300 to a total of 450 damage. It's going to knock this tower here on the next shot. Now, because I'm playing the Rus, we will not be able to see some of the other artillery pieces, but this is another one of the more generic ones that almost everyone gets access to, and it is the Bombard. Now this will do 170 siege damage, but 340 versus building. And on top of it, it does have a significant amount of splash damage, so it will still hit really hard into anything that's charging it, anything of the sort. So even though it is obviously geared towards long-range destruction of buildings and it cannot pivot, it will still do quite a bit of damage to any infantry or cavalry forces that it happens to shoot into. So as a whole, those are all of the infantry units and artillery units on the base level that you'll be accessing in Age of Empires 4. It is worth noting, of course, too, that you do get access to some variation of a religious unit depending upon the civilization you'll be using that can do any kind of healing, or if they're carrying a relic here. Let's see if I get shot by doing this. They can do a conversion. Oh, and then he gets just killed outright. But you get the idea here. Holding that relic will allow you to convert any units, brings them into your fort, just like you've seen in previous Age of Empires. But for the most part, this unit will be focused on grabbing relics, bringing them back to your sanctuaries, your monasteries, whatever it is, and healing your units. Other factions and civilizations will get certain bonuses to using monks in different variations. Like the Rus, for example, get this really cool bonus here called Saint's Blessing, which means that as they do melee damage, it increases armor and damage of nearby allied Rus military units for a duration. So again, this is your solid breakdown here of all of the infantry, cavalry, and artillery pieces of Age of Empires 4. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Don't forget to comment, like, and or subscribe. But have a good one, and take care.